Bonjour tout le monde. J'espère que tout le monde a passé une bonne
I hope that you had a wonderful Fête Saint-Jean yesterday. For many Quebecers and Francophones, the Saint-Jean is the beginning of the summer. Classes are over, diplomas have been handed over, and summer jobs begin. But this year, things are a bit different because of COVID-19. The reality is that there are not as many jobs for students as last year. And without a job, it's very difficult to pay for tuition or daily expenses. We had announced in April a $9 billion plan to assist students and new graduates. This includes the Canada Emergency Benefit for students, which provides $1,250 until August. We also said that we would create thousands of new jobs for youth in the sectors that need assistance, and to implement a program that would give out grants to those who are involved in their communities. And today, we are following up with these commitments. We are launching the Canada Grant for Student Volunteer Work, which will allow youth to obtain experience, all the while contributing to their communities. If you're a student in Cégep or university, or if you've just obtained your diploma and you decide to do volunteer work this summer, you are eligible for a grant to $1,000 to $5,000. The exact amount will be determined according to the number of hours worked between June 18th and September 15th. To learn more about this program and to find opportunities in your region, go on the government website. Today, we are launching the I Want to Help portal. Within the framework of our assistance to students, we will also invest $40 million to create 5,000 MyTax post-secondary positions. MyTax is an NGO that encourages cooperation between students and the private sector. They help to train the next generation of researchers and implement innovative programs. Normally, MyTax programs are destined to students at the master's or PhD level that do research. The funding that we're announcing today will allow these students to extend the scope of their programs, will include students at an MBA doing other studies, medical studies or legal studies. They will be matched up with companies that are experiencing difficulties because of COVID-19. MyTax allows to create new partnerships with organizations such as hospitals, foundations, and municipal governments in order to create more options for youth. This is a good news story, not just for the students who will be able to use their knowledge, but also for the business owners and for the future of our country. Innovation is taking a central role in the world economy. To ensure resilience of the Canadian economy, we need to invest in research and especially in youth. We need to make sure that youth have the necessary tools to work, to innovate, to succeed in tomorrow's economy. And this is why our government will invest in Summer Jobs Canada. We will add 10,000 job placements for students between 15 and 30 years of age. We are also going to support the creation of 20,000 other placements for students in Cégep and university in sectors where there's a strong demand through the practical workplace placement program. And also, so that youth will be prepared for the jobs of the future, we're investing in the digital skills program for youth and computers for schools.
Students are facing unique challenges this summer due to the pandemic. At the same time, many are wondering how they can help in the fight against COVID-19. So today, we're launching the new Canada Student Service Grant, which will allow post-secondary students and recent grads to gain valuable experience while also contributing to their communities. If you're a college or university student, or if you just graduated and you decide to volunteer this summer, you could get a grant of between $1,000 and $5,000. The exact amount will depend on how many hours you've completed. To learn more about this program and find opportunities near you, you can head to the Government of Canada website, where today we launched the new I Want to Help portal. Our government will also invest $40 million to create 5,000 MyTax internships for post-secondary students as part of our $9 billion plan to help students during this crisis. MyTax is an NGO that builds partnerships between universities and industry. With their training programs, internships, and projects, they help shape the next generation of innovators. Usually, MyTax caters to master's or PhD research students, but with the funding we're announcing today, they'll expand their internship opportunities to undergraduate students and students in professional programs like law, medicine, or business. For example, one of their new programs will connect MBA students to small businesses that are facing challenges because of the pandemic. The funding will also allow MyTax to partner with more organizations like hospitals, foundations, and municipal governments to create even more opportunities for young people. If we want to build a strong and resilient economy, we have to invest in the next generation. We have to make sure our young people have the right tools to work, innovate, and succeed in the economy of the future. In this vein, our government will invest in Canada Summer Jobs to create 10,000 new job placements for young people aged between 15 and 30. We will also support an additional 20,000 job placements for post-secondary students in high-demand sectors through the Student Work Placement Program. And to make sure young people are prepared for the jobs of tomorrow, we're investing in the Digital Skills for Youth and the Computer for Schools Plus programs. Minister Baines will have more to say on this later, but here's the bottom line. There are fewer jobs and many co-op, internship, and community service placements because of the pandemic. So if you're a student and new grad, we're creating tens of thousands of jobs for you. We're making sure that you can still learn new skills, gain valuable work experience, make money for the year ahead, and contribute to your community. Au fil des ans, le Canada s'est affirmé comme un leader mondial.
Canada is a world leader in innovation. Our researchers, our scientists are recognized worldwide for their discoveries, whether it be in AI, the aerospace industry, healthcare discoveries. Since the beginning of this crisis, we've been able to count on them to help us to protect people's health. This is why, in April, we launched a competition to fund research in order to halt the spread of the virus and to mitigate the consequences in our communities. Today, we are announcing that we are going to support 139 research teams throughout the country. This is a total investment of almost $110 million for COVID-19 research for the years to come.
Over the past few weeks, we've seen our hard work and sacrifices start to pay off. And to continue on the right track, we need to be thinking not just about the next weeks, but about the next months and even years. And that's what we're doing with today's investments. With that, I'm now happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone for questions. One question, one follow-up. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Kate Bolangaro, Bloomberg, line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. You told Bill Morneau to maintain Canada's AAA credit rating in his mandate letter, and one of the big three agencies just downgraded us. What does this say about your government as money managers, and are there any fiscal anchors left to hold on to?
What it says is, in this historic, unprecedented pandemic, we needed to help Canadians. We came into this situation with one of the best balance sheets in the G7, and we put that to work for people. We put more than $50 billion into people's pockets through the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. We've supported our entrepreneurs. We've made sure through various programs that Canadians could not only protect themselves through this pandemic, but also hold our economic standing so that when we get out of this, as we restart, our economy will come roaring back. That was a decision that we needed to make, because supporting Canadians is always the priority of this government. Okay. Dans cette pandémie, dans cette crise,
During this pandemic, this unprecedented crisis, we needed to help Canadians first. This is why we invested over $50 billion in the CERB to allow Canadians not only to make decisions to protect themselves during this pandemic, to flatten the curve and to protect people from COVID-19, but also to allow our workers, our families, and our business owners to be able to weather the crisis in order to come back stronger than ever. This was the priority of our government, and it will continue to be so, to invest so that Canadians can weather the storm.
Swapping Meng Wanzhou for the two Michaels. Are you scared doing so would set a precedent and give Xi Jinping more leverage to blackmail you later on?
It is obvious that the first priority of any government is to protect its citizens. And that's why we are working so incredibly hard to bring back those two Michaels who've been arbitrarily detained for political reasons, as Beijing continues to suggest. And that's wrong. But at the same time, our responsibility is to make sure that we're also protecting Canadians into the future. And if countries around the world, including China, realize that by arbitrarily arresting random Canadians, they can get what they want out of Canada politically, well, that makes an awful lot more Canadians who travel around the world vulnerable to that kind of pressure. So we will continue to stand for our strong, independent justice system. We will do everything we can to bring home the two Michaels, and we will continue to do everything we need to do to make sure that all Canadians are protected going forward. Okay. Une des responsabilités premières de
One of the main responsibilities of our government is to ensure the safety of its citizens. This is why we are working tirelessly to bring back both Michaels who have been arbitrarily detained in China. Protecting Canadians means protecting all Canadians, including those who in the future will travel throughout the world, including in China. And if our government understands that by arbitrarily detaining Canadians, they can exert pressure on the government to obtain what they want, all Canadians traveling internationally become vulnerable. It is therefore essential to respect the rule of law and to make sure that countries such as China understand that we will not endanger Canadians in the future because of political pressure that is being exerted.
Merci. Prochaine question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Michel Lamarche, TVA. À vous.
Hello, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to hear you speak on this study that speaks to the fact that Canada has been the worst of the OECD countries with regards to the deaths in long-term care homes. I'd like to hear your reaction to this, and I'd also like to know we should have federal regulations, shouldn't we, in these long-term care homes? I think that this report confirms what we were all suspecting. That is, that Canada is not taking care of seniors appropriately. We saw this since the beginning of the pandemic, whether it be challenges in BC, in the Lynn Valley Care Centre, in the CHSLDs in Quebec, or the reports that were tabled by the armed forces in Quebec and Ontario. We see that we have a huge challenge in Canada with regards to the respect and the care of seniors. I am deeply concerned by this. This is why, for several weeks now, every Thursday evening, I bring this up with the premiers of the provinces. This is why we offered $14 billion in funding to help our seniors and our most vulnerable citizens to improve the situation. We hope that provinces will accept this funding and make the necessary changes. As I've been saying, this also highlights the need to have very important conversations with provinces, all the while respecting the fact that this is their jurisdiction. It's a provincial jurisdiction. We do have to recognize, though, that provinces have failed, have not taken adequate care of the seniors. Should the federal government play a greater role? This is a discussion that we'll have to have respectfully and in cooperation with all the provincial premiers. Yes, this is a reflection that you've been having for weeks and months now. Is the federal government thinking of imposing federal regulations for all the long-term care homes throughout the country? Are you going ahead with your negotiations with Quebec when you talk about the armed forces leaving and the Red Cross personnel arriving? Yes, we have very positive discussions with the province of Quebec on this transition between soldiers and the Red Cross staff. As I've been saying, the federal government is not going to abandon seniors in Quebec. We will be there to help the province so that they can take control of the situation in the long-term care homes. Now, with regards to conversations that are underway with the premiers, we need to do better. We need to do better for seniors, and the federal government is committed to doing more, whether it be through regulations that could be applied countrywide or other measures. We will work with provinces to improve the situation. But one thing is very clear, we have to do better. As government, as different levels of government, as a country, we have to do better by our seniors.
We will continue to work with the premiers on ensuring that our long-term care centres are properly supported, whether that's by bringing in national standards, whether that's by extra funding, whether that's by looking at the Canada Health Act. There are a range of things that we can do. We will do it in discussion, in collaboration, in respect that it is the province's jurisdiction to oversee care for elders in those long-term centres. But at the same time, what this recent report has shown, and quite frankly what this pandemic has shown from the very beginning, is that the job isn't being adequately done in long-term care centres across the country. We need to do better. There are some great examples of successes, but there are also some terrible counterexamples. And we need to, as a country and as all orders of government, ensure that we are doing better by our seniors.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Ryan Tumulty, National Post, line open.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Your rent subsidy program runs out next week, and we're hearing a lot of concerns from businesses about it, about whether or not it might be extended, but also as they're starting to reopen and starting to do business here in the month of June, they're worried they might, in effect, actually do too much business and end up not qualifying for the subsidy, even though they were closed for the entire month of April and May. I'm wondering if you're looking at extending that program or changing the amount that their revenue has to drop to account for that.
As we've said from the beginning, as this pandemic evolves, we are adjusting our programs. It is obvious that programs that worked and were designed to keep the economy shut down so that everyone would stay safe are not necessarily going to be exactly the right programs for an economy that is restarting, for people getting back to work. That's why every step of the way we have been adjusting and looking at adjusting our various programs so that, as you point out, Ryan, there isn't a disincentive to hire or to grow or to be successful. We want all companies, all businesses to do as best as they can, as hire back as many people as possible, to start getting as much profit, as much benefits as they can. We don't want programs to have the counter impact of holding them back because they will lose help that they will continue to need. This is something we are looking at very closely on the wage subsidy, on the rent program, and on other programs as well. We want people to feel like they should be growing as fast as they can and getting the support that they need. Okay.
Since the beginning of this pandemic, we had recognized that we would need to adjust programs as the situation evolved. The program set out in the beginning to help people to stay at home, to help businesses to stay closed, are not necessarily the programs that will be perfectly adapted to an economy that's reopening. We will adjust to encourage and create incentives so that businesses can hire and so that they can open up again without having to restrain their economic activity. I understand that there's a consistent need for help, but we do have to encourage businesses to succeed and to grow, and that's what we will do.
Yeah, sir, just on another topic, you spoke with the Egyptian president yesterday. There's a Canadian citizen named Yasser Albaz who's been in prison there for over a year, and his family's concerned that he may have developed COVID and is not getting appropriate treatment. I'm wondering if his consular case came up and if you can give any update on that.
Yes, I can highlight that in my conversation with President al-Sisi yesterday, we spoke directly about the case of Mr. Albaz. We will continue to work together, and we will continue as a country to stand up for Canadians in difficulty overseas. We are working very closely with Egyptian authorities on this case, and we'll continue to monitor it very, very closely, hearing very clearly the voices of family members and concerned Canadians about Mr. Albaz's situation. Okay. Oui, dans ma conversation avec le président.
Yes, in my conversation with President El-Sisi, we spoke to the situation about Mr. Albaz. We will continue to work together. We will continue to work for the return of Mr. Albaz to Canada.
Call on the line. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Je voudrais revenir sur
Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to come back to the Meng Wanzhou issue and the two Michaels. An open letter was sent by former parliamentarians, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Louise Arbour. And in this letter, they're asking that Mrs. Wanzhou be freed, and that this would allow to redefine the approach and would allow us to create a new relationship with China. What do you think about this? I completely disagree with these distinguished Canadians. I do appreciate their involvement, but the reality is that freeing up Meng Wanzhou to solve a short-term issue will imperil thousands of Canadians traveling in China and throughout the world. This would indicate that it is possible for a government to have a political influence over Canada by randomly detaining Canadians. We are working extremely hard to free the two Michaels who have been arbitrarily detained in China. We will always stand up for the respect of our legal system, our independent legal system, but also we want a country such as China to understand that we have an independent legal system, and we will not accept political pressure, especially if they endanger Canadians with these types of arbitrary detentions.
I respect the distinguished Canadians who put forward that letter, but I deeply disagree with them. The idea of solving a short-term situation by creating a precedent that demonstrates to China that all they or another country has to do is randomly arrest a handful of Canadians to put political pressure on a government to do what we want, even by going against the independence of our justice system, would endanger the millions of Canadians who live and travel overseas every single year. We cannot allow political pressures or random arrests of Canadian citizens to influence the functioning of our justice system. So I respect these individuals, but they're wrong in their approach.
Oui, en suivi sur une question.
A follow-up question. It's a more specific question. What Mr. Greenspan says in his legal opinion is that the Minister of Justice does have the ability to intervene at the present time in the legal process, and that it's not really interference, that it's not required to wait to the very end of the process. Do you share this interpretation? And if not, could you explain what your opinion is? I don't want to go into legal details right now, and I don't need to do that, because regardless of the tools that we have, legitimate legal tools, the result would be the same. China would have been able to exert enough pressure on Canada so that we would free one of their citizens. And this political pressure would have been increased by arbitrarily detaining 2 Canadians. We cannot allow China to believe that they can deal with Canada in this way, not now and not in the future. We need to show that our legal system is independent, that there will be no political interference either from China or elsewhere, and we will clearly demonstrate that the way one gets something from Canada is not by arresting, randomly arresting Canadians. We need to respect this principle. Philippe Vincent, Poésie, Radio-Canada. First question on the long-term care homes and the healthcare transfers. I tried to understand what you were saying earlier to Michel Lamarche, but it's hard for me to really decode what you're trying to say here. Do we need federal standards for the long-term care homes or not? We need more standards. We need more protections for seniors in long-term care homes throughout the country. Things have to change. We do need to have improvements. Now, what form will this take? We don't know. We have to have conversations with the premiers. This is their responsibility, and they failed to protect seniors during this pandemic. Can the federal government play a role? Yes, absolutely. Should the federal government play a role? Well, we can talk with the provinces. It's their field of jurisdiction. I do not want to meddle in a field of provincial jurisdiction, but they need assistance in order to serve seniors. We will be there to help. Now, what form will this help take? This is where our federation works by having negotiations, discussions in a collaborative fashion, and I will do that this evening when I sit with them. Yes, but when you talk about assistance,
current system of supporting our seniors across this country has not worked. It is a provincial responsibility, so it is them who have failed to support our seniors. But of course, the federal government is happy to be there to help. We want to respect provincial jurisdictions, but I think we know things need to change. Do we need national standards, or do the provinces just need to increase their standards significantly to reach an equivalent level across the country? These are conversations we can have with the premiers, are conversations that we've had on an ongoing basis every Thursday night for the past 15 weeks. The federal government will be there to help for our seniors. How exactly we do that? Well, in our federation, because of the constitutional division of powers, we will work in consultation, in respect with the premiers. But we know Canada as a whole, all levels of government, need to do better for our seniors, and we will be there to do that.
Mais les provinces disent que ça prend pas nécessairement plus
But the
de
provinces
temps,
are
ça
saying it's not really standards that we require. They need more money for health. And you're going to say that the healthcare transfers have been increased. I know that you're going to say we have $14 billion on the table, but the provinces are saying that they need 25% of healthcare costs funded by Ottawa. Are you able to commit yourself to this and to say, yes, soon we're going to fund 25% of the healthcare costs in the provinces? And this is what the provinces are requesting. I'm not going to negotiate in public. I've told the provincial premiers that, yes, we're open to having a discussion. And this discussion will continue in the fall on healthcare transfer payments. I know that this COVID experience has highlighted the need. And we'll also see where these conversations will bring us.
Oliver with CTV National News. Quebec has said that they will no longer publish daily case counts, death counts, or testing numbers starting on Friday. Doctors are saying that this is a lack of transparency that poses a risk to public health and fuels mistrust of the public in the middle of a pandemic. Will you ask Premier Legault to change this decision? And what message do you think that this sends to Canadians who are being told that the risk of COVID-19 is still very present?
I think every province makes its own decisions about how transparent it needs to be and how much it will provide data and information to its citizens. I think there are probably examples. I think of PEI where there haven't been a case in many, many weeks. I doubt that they're feeling like they have to publish case numbers every single day. They may well do it. I don't know. In Quebec, there's still very much a significant number of cases every single day, significant numbers of deaths, unfortunately, every single day. And I certainly hope that Premier Legault would continue to be transparent and open with Quebecers and indeed with all Canadians, as he has been from the very beginning.
We recognize that different provinces have different situations. In PEI, they haven't had a case in weeks. Perhaps they don't feel the need to publish new figures every day because the figures are zero. I think that in Quebec, where we continue to see new cases every day, it's important to see how the situation is evolving. I hope that Premier Legault will continue to be open and transparent with citizens, as he has been since the beginning. I believe that it's reassuring for citizens, but also it's important for researchers and for scientists to clearly see what's happening with regards to the pandemic.
3.3 of the Extradition Act allows the Justice Minister to intervene and stop an extradition. Did you know about this provision when Meng was detained? And if so, why do you continue to say that Canada cannot intervene when the legislative power is there? And if you're not going to use that power, what other options do you have if China has already hinted they'd be open to a swap?
We're in a situation where, first and foremost, the priority of any Canadian government needs to be to keep Canadians safe, which is why we're working incredibly hard to bring home those two Michaels who have been arbitrarily detained. China itself has admitted that there is a direct link between the detention of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor and the arrest in an extradition process of Meng Wanzhou. We have an independent justice system that is going through its process. And yes, there is and has been from the very beginning a element of that involves input from the Justice Minister at the appropriate time. However, the bigger question is whether or not we want China or other countries to get the message that all they have to do to get leverage over the Canadian government is randomly arrest a couple of Canadians. That not only puts Canadians in difficulty now, but puts them in difficulty and in danger in the coming years. We need to continue to be absolutely crystal clear that Canada has an independent judiciary, and those processes will unfold independently of any political pressure, including by foreign governments. We deplore what China did in arbitrarily detaining the two Michaels, in directly linking those arrests which came a few days after the arrest on an extradition treaty of Meng Wanzhou to each other. And we will continue to remain steadfast and strong and say very clearly in our actions and in our words that randomly arresting Canadians doesn't give you leverage over the government of Canada anywhere in the world. Nous déplorons que la Chine est liée.
We deplore that China has chosen to arbitrarily detain two Canadians in a very random fashion following the arrest of Meng Wanzhou in an extradition process. We need to make sure that countries throughout the world understand that it's not a way of obtaining leverage with the Canadian government to arbitrarily detain Canadians. If this would be allowed, we would be imperiling millions of Canadians traveling throughout the world. It would make them so much more vulnerable.
How do you explain to the families of the two Michaels that your government can but won't intervene in the extradition process, which could lead to the freedoms of these two Michaels, and by not acting, they could languish in Chinese detention for years to come?
I have met with a number of family members, and I feel deeply for not just the two Michaels who are in a very difficult situation, but their families who have endured a year and a half of difficulties with this arbitrary detention by Chinese authorities. But it is not just the two Michaels who are at question here. It is every Canadian who travels to China or anywhere else overseas. If the Chinese government concludes from this exchange and this interaction that it is an effective way to gain leverage over Canadians and over the Canadian government to randomly arrest Canadians, then no Canadian will be safe going forward. So I understand the difficulty and the heart-wrenching ordeal that these two Michaels are going through right now. But always, I need to focus on, and our government needs to focus on, what is going to keep Canadians safe into the future. And to demonstrate to China that they can just arrest Canadians and get what they want out of Canada, even for us going against the independence of our judicial system, would be absolutely unacceptable. Je comprends à quel point c'est une situation épouvantable.
I understand this is a horrific situation for the two Michaels and their families. I've had exchanges with family members, and I know that it's extremely painful for them. At the same time, my responsibility goes beyond the protection of two Canadians. Tens of thousands of Canadians travel to China each and every year. 3 million Canadians are traveling throughout the world at all times. They would be rendered vulnerable to arrest. If countries throughout the world, if governments throughout the world concluded that the way of obtaining what they wanted from Canada would be to arbitrarily arrest Canadians and to make their lives difficult because of that. So we have to stand up for the independence of our legal system, for the respect of our international treaties, and we cannot allow ourselves to be influenced by the arrest of two people. If we did this, we would be putting in danger an untold number of Canadians in the future.
revoke visas for Chinese students studying in Canada if they have close ties to the Chinese Communist Party, or that Canada target Chinese officials through the Magnitsky Act. Would you consider that?
As we've said, we're looking at a range of options and of measures, and we're continuing to exert various actions in order to bring back those Michaels safely. We will continue to work extremely hard and look at all different ways to ensure that we bring these Canadians home. We have, over the past number of years, demonstrated significant success in standing up for Canadians in trouble overseas. We will continue to do everything we need to do to bring them home without further endangering Canadians in the future. Comme j'ai dit, nous allons continuer d'explorer.
We will continue to explore all possible options to bring these two Canadians home, but we will not endanger Canadians who might be traveling in China or elsewhere in the future.
Global News. Those 19 eminent Canadians who signed the letter say that the Canadian foreign policy is essentially frozen while the two Michaels are being held in China. Do you agree with that assessment?
On the contrary, we continue to engage substantially around the world and with China on many different issues. But it is certain that this issue of China trying to exert political pressure on Canada by having arbitrarily detained two Canadians in response to us fulfilling obligations under an international extradition treaty is causing a challenge in our relationship. We need to demonstrate that we have an independent judiciary, and we will continue to respect that independent judiciary regardless of the pressure put on us by foreign governments. And that's why, even as we do everything we can to bring those Michaels home, we will not give in to these political pressures and compromise the independence of our judiciary or allow others to conclude that there are political paths to get what they want out of Canada's independent judicial system.
We will continue to do everything we need to do to bring back the two Michaels. At the same time, we continue to work on different files with China. This is an element that is affecting all our conversations. But it's an extremely important time for us. We need to demonstrate that we will not bend to political pressure that will compromise our independent judicial system.
From Maclean's, Canadians have a lot of questions about how the RCMP conducted itself as a mass shooter terrorized Nova Scotians last April. Everybody seems to agree that answers to those questions are necessary, but so far they don't seem to be coming anytime soon. Will the government call a public inquiry into the shooting?
There is obviously an ongoing RCMP investigation into what actually happened in terms of the shooting, but there are many questions about the role of domestic violence, about the situation where the shooter was able to get his hands on police vehicles and kit. There are many larger questions, and we are working with the government of Nova Scotia to ensure a process whereby those questions get answered for the families, for the communities, for Canadians across the country. And we certainly hope to have things to announce in the coming days. Okay. Évidemment, il y a énormément de questions par rapport à ce qui s'est passé.
There are many questions that need to be answered with regards to the incident in Nova Scotia. There's an investigation. They're looking at the circumstances around this, but there are broader issues around the role of domestic violence, on how this person would have been able to obtain RCMP equipment. These questions deserve answers. We're working with Nova Scotia on a process that will allow us to find these answers in an open and transparent way. We hope to have more to announce in the days to come. Thank you, everyone.
Hello again, I'm Martin.